This time, we're going to look at a really interesting question. How did a poem written on the back of an envelope during such intense pressure become one of the most powerful symbols of a nation? You know, the Star-Spangled Banner.
It really is quite fascinating how something so simple, a few lines of verse, can embody an entire nation's ideals and inspire generations.
Yeah, and what's even more remarkable is that the Star-Spangled Banner wasn't written during some kind of peaceful or tranquil time. It was born out of chaos and conflict, the heart of the War of 1812.
That's right.
And our source for this deep dive is the video Star-Spangled Banner, as you've never heard it. And that video tells this really dramatic tale.
It is dramatic, a tale that really revolves around this lawyer named Francis Scott Key, who found himself right in the middle of a pivotal moment in American history.
Yeah, but before we dive into all that and the bombs bursting in air and all, let's set the scene. It's 1814, and the young United States is locked in this fierce struggle for survival against the mighty British Empire.
It was a tough time for the young nation. The War of 1812 was really like a second war for independence. They were fighting to prove that the United States was truly a sovereign nation, and the stakes were incredibly high.
Yeah, I bet. So enter Francis Scott Key. Now, he wasn't just any lawyer, was he?
No, not at all. Key was known for his eloquence and his sharp legal mind, and maybe even more importantly, his deep patriotism. He was a staunch Federalist, a firm believer in a strong central government, and a very vocal critic of British aggression.
So this isn't just some, dry legal eagle going through the motions. This is a man who really believes in his country's ideals. And he gets kind of an unusual assignment.
Right. He does. President James Madison himself asks Key to go secure the release of Dr. William Beanes. He was a prominent Maryland physician who had been captured by the British. Can you imagine the pressure Key must have felt? He wasn't just representing one client. He was representing the interests of the entire United States.
Oh, wow, yeah. So Key set sail for the British fleet.
Yeah.
Just a lone figure navigating all those treacherous waters of diplomacy. I would love to hear a little more about that negotiation. What was the tension like? What strategies did he use?
Oh, it was a delicate dance. Key had to try to appeal to the British sense of honor and justice, while at the same time asserting the rights of the United States. He had to be persuasive, but also firm. Diplomatic, but unwavering.
It sounds tough.
It was.
And thankfully, he succeeds. He negotiates Dr. Beanes' release. But like we were talking about before, there's a catch.
Oh, yeah. And it's a dramatic one. The British were planning this massive bombardment of Fort McHenry. That was a key American stronghold guarding the entrance to Baltimore Harbor.
Yeah, I know this wasn't just any fort. This was strategically vital, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. If the British had captured Fort McHenry, they could have potentially controlled all access to Baltimore, which was this major port city and a real symbol of American resilience. The fall of Baltimore could have just dealt a devastating blow to American morale and could have even potentially altered the course of the entire war.
So just to recap here, we have Francis Scott Key on board this British ship. He successfully negotiated this prisoner release, only to find out that the very fort where this prisoner is being held is about to be attacked.
Talk about bad timing.
I know, right? So the British essentially hand the Americans an ultimatum. Surrender the fort, lower the American flag, or face complete annihilation.
Yeah, and the odds are not in the Americans' favor. Fort McHenry, while well defended, was significantly outgunned by that British fleet. It was like a total David versus Goliath situation.
Hundreds of British warships, armed with some of the most powerful cannons at the time, are converging on this one lone fort. That scene must have been terrifying. Can you imagine the roar of the cannons? The sky lit up by all the rockets, the explosions, the air thick with smoke, and the smell of gunpowder.
It was a relentless barrage. It was specifically designed to break the American spirit and force their surrender. The British were so confident that Fort McHenry would crumble under their might.
Yeah, and all this while, Francis Scott Key is stuck on this British ship, forced to just watch this spectacle. I can't imagine what must have been going through his mind at that time. The fate of his countrymen and the future of his entire nation all hanging in the balance.
I know, it's hard to even fathom. And all throughout that long night, as this bombardment raged on Key, he just kept his eyes fixed on one thing: a large American flag flying proudly over Fort McHenry. It had been specifically designed to be visible from a distance.
And that flag becomes a real symbol of defiance, doesn't it? A beacon of hope amidst all this chaos and destruction.
Yes, exactly. And you see, this wasn't just any flag, it was massive, 42 by 30 feet.
Wow.
It was commissioned by Major George Armistead. He was the commander of Fort McHenry, and he specifically requested that it be large enough to be seen from miles away.
Why was that so important?
Well, he understood the power of symbols. He knew that that flag, even through all the smoke and haze of the battle, would represent not just the fort itself, but the resilience and determination of the entire American nation.
And what about down below inside the fort? I can imagine all those American prisoners huddled in darkness, unable to see what's happening. They just hear these deafening explosions and feel the ground shaking.
Yeah, and all they can do is ask Key repeatedly if the flag's still flying. Is there still hope?
And the answer is yes. But what's really remarkable is that that flag's survival isn't just a matter of chance, It's a testament to the courage and sacrifice of the men who defended it.
For sure. The bombardment was relentless. The flag was hit multiple times, the fabric was all shredded, the pole was damaged, but somehow it just remained aloft.
And it's almost like it refused to fall, like a physical manifestation of the American spirit.
And you know what a lot of people don't know? That flagpole was actually held up by the bodies of some of the American soldiers who'd fallen defending it. They literally gave their lives to make sure that symbol of their nation would stay flying.
Oh, wow. So we had this really incredible scene playing out here. A lone fort, battered but unbowed, a flag defying all odds. And this lawyer witnessing this display of just unwavering courage. He was forever changed by what he saw.
Oh, absolutely. It was in this crucible of fire and blood that the Star-Spangled Banner was born.
I think that's a really good place to pause for now. We've set the stage, we've explored all this context, and we've witnessed this incredible resilience of Fort McHenry and its defenders.
Yeah.
But the story isn't over yet. There's still so much more to uncover, including how the song itself came to be.
As dawn breaks over the Chesapeake Bay, the smoke starts to clear, and you can just feel this sense of hushed awe settling over the scene. The bombardment has stopped, and they're still standing as Fort McHenry, its flag, all tattered, but still defiant, waving in that morning breeze.
It's an image that would be with Francis Scott Key forever. And it's right at this moment of just profound relief and inspiration, that he starts to write the words that would eventually become the Star-Spangled Banner.
Oh yeah, just imagine him, overwhelmed with emotion, scribbling those iconic lines on the back of an envelope, trying to capture that raw power of what he'd just witnessed. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming.
It's amazing. Those words are so evocative. They really paint this picture in your mind of that dramatic night. And to think this poem, originally titled Defense of Fort McHenry, almost didn't make it. It was almost lost to history.
It's true. At first, Key just shared it with his brother-in-law, Judge Joseph Hopper Nicholson. But Nicholson recognized its power immediately, and he had it printed in a Baltimore newspaper.
So this wasn't some big planned release. It was just kind of put out into the world by chance.
Yeah, pretty much. And yet, from those humble beginnings, the poem just took off, spreading through all the newspapers and pamphlets, capturing the hearts and minds of a nation that was really looking for a symbol of unity and strength.
Yeah, what was it about those words that made people connect with them so strongly?
Well, Key's poem wasn't just some boring account of a battle. It was this heartfelt expression of patriotism, of standing up to tyranny. It was about the unwavering belief in those ideals of freedom and liberty.
And it spoke to this nation that was still so young, trying to figure out its place in the world.
Exactly. The United States was less than 40 years old at that point. They'd won the Revolutionary War and secured their independence. But in a lot of ways, the War of 1812 was a real test. It was like, could they really stand up to a global superpower and defend their freedoms?
And so this poem, born out of that incredibly intense experience, became this rallying cry, this symbol of the strength of the American people.
Yeah, exactly. It gave them a voice, let them express their hopes and fears and their determination. It was a reminder that even when things feel impossible, they could still win.
But it's interesting that the poem didn't immediately become the anthem we know today.
Oh, you're right. In the beginning, people would set Defense of Fort McHenry to a bunch of different popular tunes. Think about that. The words that would one day be the national anthem sung to completely different melodies.
Wow, that's hard to imagine. So how did it end up being paired with the music we're all so familiar with?
One of the most common tunes people used for it was this British drinking song called To Anacreon in Heaven. It was composed by John Stafford Smith.
Well, that's kind of ironic, isn't it? The song that would become this huge symbol of American independence and patriotism was originally set to a tune from their old colonial rulers.
It's funny, but it also shows how culture works, how symbols and melodies can move beyond their origins and take on totally new meanings.
Right, but why that tune in particular? Was there something special about it?
Well, the melody of To Anacreon in Heaven is pretty complex. It's got this big vocal range and it's very dramatic, so it worked really well with those powerful lyrics. It just added to the emotional impact.
It's almost like the tune itself has that same feeling of struggle and triumph that the words do.
Yeah, I think so too. And over time, that pairing became more and more popular. It basically became the way everyone performed Key's poem.
But it still wasn't the official national anthem. Right?
No, not yet. It was really well known as a patriotic song, and people would sing it at all sorts of public events and military ceremonies.
Okay, so when did it actually become the national anthem?
It wasn't until the early 20th century that things really started moving. There were all these debates and people lobbying for it to become official.
Right.
Finally, in 1931, President Herbert Hoover signed a bill making the Star-Spangled Banner the official national anthem of the United States.
So this poem that started out as just one man's reflection on a really important event in history written on an envelope became this huge symbol of national unity and pride.
Yeah, and it's lasted for over 2 centuries. Its melody and lyrics have touched generations. It reminds us of all the sacrifices people made to secure American freedom.
It's a reminder that those freedoms, the ideals in the Constitution weren't easy to come by, and we have to keep working to protect them. But something I find fascinating is how the meaning of the Star-Spangled Banner has kind of grown and changed over time. It's gone way beyond that original context.
That's true. It's almost become a global anthem. It's about courage and resilience and fighting for what you believe in. And that resonates with people all over the world, people who have faced their own struggles against oppression.
Yeah, like it's this message that goes beyond borders. This song that can inspire hope and courage in people who just want to be free.
And it brings up a big question, doesn't it? What does the Star-Spangled Banner mean to you today, especially in a world with so much injustice and inequality, where people are still fighting for basic human rights?
It really is a powerful question. I mean, the world's so different now than it was back when Francis Scott Key was writing. But these themes, courage and resilience and the fight for freedom, I think they're even more important now than they were then.
I think you're right. I mean, think about it. We're dealing with things that Key probably couldn't have even imagined, like global pandemics and climate change and all this crazy technology that's kind of blurring the lines between what's real and what's not.
Yeah, it's almost too much to wrap your head around sometimes. So where does a song like the Star-Spangled Banner fit into all of this? Does it even mean the same thing in a world that's so different?
That's a great question. I think it does, but maybe in a more like a subtler way. The Star-Spangled Banner at its heart, it's about the human spirit. It's about overcoming tough times.
Yeah.
It's about believing in something bigger than yourself and standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it feels like you're fighting a losing battle.
And I think that's something that connects the people no matter who they are or where they come from.
Exactly. And we've seen it over and over again throughout history. People coming together to fight for justice and equality and a better world.
Right.
The civil rights movement, the fight for LGBTQ+ rights, all the movements trying to tackle climate change. That spirit from the Star-Spangled Banner, it's there in all of them.
Yeah, it's like that flag, battered but still standing, flying over Fort McHenry. It's this symbol of hope, this reminder that even when things are really bad, we can still find a way to keep going.
And that's a message that we really need to hear right now, because we are facing some huge challenges. But the Star-Spangled Banner, it's there to remind us that we've been through tough times before and that we can find the strength to get through this too.
Yeah, and it's not just about sitting back and watching things happen. It's about getting involved, speaking up, using whatever talents or resources we have to actually make a difference.
Exactly. And that can be a lot of different things. You could be standing up for what you believe in even when it's hard, speaking out against injustice, supporting causes you care about.
Or even just connecting with people who are different from you, building relationships and working together to make things more fair and just for everyone.
Yeah, that's the real point of the Star-Spangled Banner, isn't it? It's not just a song. It's about remembering that we're all human and that we all have the capacity to be brave and compassionate, and that we all have a responsibility to leave the world a little better than we found it.
So next time you hear the Star-Spangled Banner, whether you're at a game or a concert or just out in the world, really take a second to think about those words and what they mean. What does freedom mean to you? And what can you do to make sure that liberty and justice are real for everybody.
Because that's what it's really all about. It's not just about one moment in history. It's about this ongoing struggle to build a better world, a world where everyone has a chance to live a good life, a life with dignity.
A powerful message, and one I hope will stick with you long after this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.